little difficult for people to wrap their heads around because they immediately connotate stress as negative. So how can this negative thing be giving me this great muscle growth? Before even talking about steroids, I would talk about using, period, whatever it is.
Okay.
And my cup here, I'm waving in front of the camera, you can't see. My cup is running thin, so to get a proper response, you have to apply a stress and then allow the body to respond to that stress. And they all look at me, kind of with this just puzzled look, kind of like when you show a magic trick to a dog. They just kind of cock their head and their ear goes up. The reality is, I'm being really specific about my wording. I don't believe in damage like, oh, you go out and drive your car really fast and something fucking breaks and now the car won't run. That's damage. And if I could take Andre's, analogy and even make it more complicated if that's necessary, is, you don't go directly from summer to winter. Of course you don't, and you get an ever-decreasing amount of sunlight and an ever-decreasing amount of temperature and all that.
Oh, yeah.
That's what the weather's doing. But what you need to intellectualize then is then that influences how fast the grass is growing, how fast the animals can eat the grass.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a damn fine-looking t-shirt you have.
Yeah.
In the 1970s, all bodybuilders used drugs, just like they do today. But no average fitness people use drugs. Now you've got every CrossFit idiot and people, doing backyard marathons and shit, and they're using drugs.
So I'm trying to do a part 2 with Broderick. What we did basically on the first part was about the stress reflex, the series of events, right?
Mm-hmm.
We went through the negative effects. I loved what Broderick always saying that it's not always a negative effect. We always get a bad way. I loved also the part about hypertrophy, where it's a bit misunderstood. As it depends on what context you put it in.
Mm-hmm.
So
the idea that hypertrophy itself is a stress reflex is a little difficult for people to wrap their heads around because they immediately connotate stress as negative. So how can this negative thing be giving me this great muscle growth?
Yeah.
So, Broderick, thank you for being here again for the part 2.
I wouldn't miss it. I enjoy talking to you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a damn fine-looking t-shirt you have.
Yeah.
I got the same. Best shits. Did you guys? Sorry, Brody. Sorry to interrupt, Brody. Did you get your coffee bottle?
I have not yet received any coffee, and my cup right here, I'm waving in front of the camera. You can't see. My cup is running thin, so
I've got Christmas.
I have to on Monday. I must track it down. Maybe it's just taking. Maybe it's stuck in the post office or something. I'll track it in next week.
We are far apart, but I would certainly enjoy it.
Oh yeah.
Oh sure.
Andrea?
Yeah, bro. Okay. Shoot.
Can you just like a segue about you, who you are, what you do?
Well, cut it short to you. Basically, I've been in the game for 20 years. Been researching for the last 16, 17 years, and my passion and hobby lies in the biochemistry, the biology of weight control, and that's it. I'm just passionate what I do and just try and bridge the fine gap between science and experience and putting the two together, and just formalizing the truth and getting the truth out there where there's a lot of nonsense, dogma, and basically that's what I do. And coach a selective amount of clients. That's about it.
Can you tell me about Broderick? Well,
for me, Broderick is definitely one of my all-time mentors. I've been following him for many, many years that he doesn't know. I've actually been secretly following him. He's stalking him, I should say. I would regard him in my sense, along with Scott Abel and Lyle McDonald, probably one of the most intelligent guys I would do in nutrition, fitness, whole scenario industry, if you want to put it that way.
Amen.
I've learned a lot from him myself, and I keep learning from him every time. You know, I think I'm not only one of his who mentors, but I think a lot of people mentor into him, and he's just he's an asset to the industry, and he's for me, he's one of the top of the tops.
Well, Broderick, there's nothing else to say.
I certainly appreciate that sort of sentiment, although I have to say, I don't know if one of the most intelligent is the right wording. I'm pretty smart, and I even bill myself as the evil genius. But on a point-to-point basis, I don't know if I can contend with guys like Lyle. I got a pretty good handle on stuff, but I don't know. Putting me on the intellect tier right alongside Lyle maybe is a little daunting to me. But for the moment, I'll take it. Let's go.
I'll reserve my comments there because Lyle's another genius within himself. I think Lyle is just he's just a superior human being in his own sense.
Smart dude. No doubt about
it. I think his new book just came out. It's a post he made, and also I think next month we're gonna have Lyle also on BrosDoScience.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he's yeah.
That is awesome stuff.
To just bring a segue to the part 2.
I see the guy.
Oh yeah.
Hey, here I am.
Hey. Looking good.
I'm trying to stay lean and healthy. That's what it's all about.
Oh yeah, in the best way. So regarding all the stress reflexes we talked about, we can have stress reflex in every aspect, as amazingly you said about the sun the other time. And what literally I don't understand many times is how can we have the stress reflex either from nutrition or from basically training in our favor without screwing our physiology up?
Well, it's not a matter of it really comes down to your wording and your cognizance of what that wording means. In that, screwing up is a really bad phrase. To get a proper response, you have to apply a stress and then allow the body to respond to that stress. That's the whole concept of stress reflex. The body must reflexively do something against what's happened. So if the stress is you go out in the sun, the reflex is going to be this series of events to ultimately protect you against that sun. If the stimulus is lifting weights and generating fatigue and muscular damage, the body's going to instigate a reflex against that. So it's not a matter of, how can I do something and get a free ride, or how can I do something and get, messed up, or whatever language you want to use. It's just a simple matter of this is the series of events that are consequential to that action. And then you either use that to your advantage or detriment, and that's about it.
We had a conversation a couple of days ago regarding the reflex and how we can use, let's say, because I'm just getting a bit annoyed over calories in, calories out nonsense.
That's big nonsense.
So basically, we can see people going to a deficit from let's say 500, 1,000 calories down, right? And they're at the beginning like, I'm losing weight, everything's fun, but that stress reflex, I'm not going to say about a word that Broderick doesn't like, but Andrea, you like that, about how we can destroy or damage our metabolism.
Well, I mean, I've seen it with physique women competitors many times. So, I've seen it in my own experience. just because the data doesn't confirm it's damage, doesn't mean it's not, I've seen women till this day, ill-advised methods that are still battling to recover, hormonally, metabolically, and biochemically, and it's living proof. So I want to see where the lab tells me that there is no, give me the proof where I've seen it in real life, you know what I mean?
I'm not sure it's where Rocco wanted to go with this particular point in the conversation, but I'll since we're talking about the biology of and the concept of the stress reflex, I maybe famously said that I don't believe in metabolic damage. The reality is I'm being really specific about my wording. I don't believe it's damage like, oh, you go out and drive your car really fast and something fucking breaks and now the car won't run. That's damage. I think this shit, it needs a repair shop. That's a different thing. What I believe Andre is referring to, and I really am only taking issue with the language, not the net result or the reality of the problem dealing with these people. But what has happened here, in my purview, is the adaptative series of events, i.e. the stress reflex. These women, specifically, we're using women as a conversation, have trained themselves to operate on such exceedingly low calorie load and at such exceedingly high volumes of exercise that they put themselves on such an incredibly high tier that it reflects as damage, because anytime they try to get down from that really high pedestal, i.e. reducing their exercise or raising their calorie load, they're on such a precipice that the fall is really large. And it's problematic to step them down because of how high they are. So it's not, in my mind, a damage. It's actually a testament to how really adaptable and dynamic the human organism is. The only problem is it's still really hard to deal with. You still have to work really hard and clever to figure out adaptive steps to bring them down from that. But you can train yourself. As a matter of fact, I said something to a client a couple of days ago, and I thought of you immediately. We were talking about in each world, and I said, to me, it's not surprising that most of the populace is awake. What's surprising to me is that they're not so awake. I just see sheer fact that people are surviving on such awful nutrition. Again, in that same light, it's such a wonderful testament to how adaptive and dynamic and survivable we are. Not only like the fitness can live on 5 calories and 5 hours, but on the other side of the coin, people live on 1,000 calories and no activity.
What would be the particular steps that you would, as you said before, the adaptation steps that take place as, if we can take it as a stress, when we go into a deficit, but to put it in the correct context, from 5 calories to 1,000 calories?
Like anything, the answer is, one, have a goal. Know where you're going. So you're presently at this poor fitness chick's at 500 calories. So the idea is, over the next 12 months, we're going to triple that. We're going to go to 1,500 calories. And then quite literally, just systematically, just like you would periodize your programming to get a 300-pound bench press or a 500-pound squat. You don't just put 500 pounds on it, just fucking, it happens and you get fucking squashed. The same thing after dietarily. So, just like your workout, you would add 2 pounds every workout until you accumulate total pounds, just like their diet. So it's 100 calories. Station, and then a 2-month adaptation, and then a 3-month just times and all stuff like tanning. I mean, I've had this conversation so many times. Think about this. Let's say it takes roughly 20 hours to do it. You know, now, how does that best allocate the 20 hours? Go outside in the sun for 20 fucking straight hours?
Yeah.
Or go out in the 2 hours at a time for 10 days?
Yeah.
Which one's going to generate a more reasonable response?
Of course, small amounts of sun every day.
However, in that same breath, you can make those amounts so small that they don't do anything. Imagine if you only went out into the sun 10 minutes a day for months, you probably wouldn't get anything.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of the stimulus must be big enough to stimulate, but not so big as to kill. And everything in the middle is the game. I mean, that's
So, Andrea, I know we're going to have you for not a long period of time.
No, that's fine. I mean, I totally, if you understand the deep underlying mechanisms, I think what Broderick's trying to, he's giving the best analogy to make people understand more thoroughly, because if you go deep in the mechanisms of the biology of all this, it can get quite deep and complicated. And I think if you listen to one of his podcasts with Ron Dubos, I think from Australia, he goes quite deep when he talks about the whole stress adapt release response and the whole Krebs cycle, and he goes into other deep you'll understand these things more thoroughly. But I think if we go into it now, it's just that it just can get a bit more complicated. You know what I mean? But I think the way he explains it now is very, it's fundamental for people to understand, because they're missing a big piece of the puzzle, and this is a big piece where a lot of people don't fit it into their teachings. Because at the end of the day, biology is where it all starts. And my perfect example, I give this scenario with everything. Summer doesn't go straight into winter. There's a process, and there's responses that happen, and there's changes, and there's climate changes, and there's everything. There's soil changes, and the same what happens within our own body, biochemically, hormonally, metabolically. You know, and like I say, calories don't measure metabolism, and that's where I think people go wrong, is they try and quantify every single detail with Fitbits, macros, calories, and the metabolism is very dynamic. You need to understand it. Take 2 apples, one grown in winter, one grown, not in winter, but one grown in a different country, in a different climate, different sun, different soil, different temperature. The calorie content is completely different, even if it's 100 gram of apple to another 100 gram of apple. Then we realize the utilization, the digestion, the assimilation of everybody's digestive tracts. You know, those are other things that people don't talk about. They think, it's just calories in, calories out, you know what I'm saying? Where this whole macros loses the whole, illusion. It becomes the illusion of control.
And if I could take Andre's, analogy and even make it more complicated if that's necessary, is, you don't go directly from summer to winter. Of course you don't, and you get an ever-decreasing amount of sunlight and an ever-decreasing amount of temperature and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what the weather's doing. But what you need to intellectualize then is then that influences how fast the grass is growing, how fast the animals can eat the grass, how sleep the animal is getting. And every single thing, you have this big top-down, okay, the weather's doing this, but then the weather has an influence on the food supply. Big influence on the animals. And then the animals behave different, the animals mate different, and the animals do this different. And before you know it, this simple little change in 5-degree increments in the temperature results in an entirely different behavioral and response pattern in the animal that you're choosing to talk about. Now also remember, there's 50 million other downstream, everything from the blade of grass to the earthworm to your neighbor are all influenced independently by that same change in macro environment. So just, if you want to say, I debited 50 calories for my diet, well, how many downstream boxes do you need to check? Like the change in the weather, it's one big change at the top. And how many little changes underneath? All that affects your thermogenesis, and that affects your activity, and that affects your time of day, your sleep hours, your serotonin, and all this stuff. And by the time you get to the bottom, you can't begin to quantify any of that.
Correct. So I wish people could just listen to that. That needs recording and needs to be played over every single YouTube nutritional video right through the wall, because that is what Broderick just said is probably one of the most important things every nutritionist, dietitian, scientist in nutrition, whatever, needs to actually listen and take that as a holy grail, because that's fundamentally important.
It's fundamentally important, but I will start with something simplistic, if I may. When always, I first remember when Broderick said you cannot cheat biology. I think we're getting stupider and stupider, and I know I sound a bit angry now, but I read an article a couple of days ago saying, guys, just drop it, just count your macros, you can get what you want. And then, you know what, I love John Bernardi's blog, and the video you showed me that was saying that, yes, we're in a lab, and we can count, yes, what a calorie is, changing, the temperature of one, from 18 to 19, let's say, degrees of the water, whatever. And then they take the protein, they put it in a lab, and they're like, yeah, this is 4 calories of energy. Then they take the fat and say, yes, it's 9. Take the carbs, and then, yes, it's 4. But at the end of the day, it's not. And everything goes down to exactly what we said before. So by hearing the word, yes, it's all about calories in, calories out. Oh, supplements. Oh, I want to go through that all the time because, yes, take this, it's going to increase your test. You didn't get your HMB or leucine because that's a big thing now, okay, about the thresholds. And the basis is, the only thing that can change stuff is just steroids, right? Everybody's avoiding to say that.
Or Jacob Wilson.
Yes. And which is, from what I've read, it's a total different environment because with the things you were saying before, we were talking about Earth, so the weather, we're in different, hemisphere or whatever, but when you take steroids, another world.
Absolutely.
And in a nutshell, can you explain me why? And then we're going to go through the steps of the adaptation we talked before. Okay? And then
Absolutely. First of all, we got to go back to the earlier statement and point out that it still holds true, and that is you cannot cheat biology. What you can do is change the relative values of things. For instance, you can't change basic economy. You can't spend more money than you make. You can't bounce checks. You can't do that sort of thing. However, the difference between my personal economy and Bill Gates' economy are radically different. He can write checks for millions of dollars with no concern.
True.
But there is a number somewhere that he can't spend more than. Now it's a staggering number. Okay, that's basically the steroid argument. Is it doesn't change the rules of economy. It just the numbers. If zeros at the end of all your accounts,
different bank account.
You've got a hell of a lot more margin to be reckless because you've got a lot more money. So that's essentially the only you need to know about steroids is the margin of what is and what isn't overtraining, and what is and what isn't protein, and what is and isn't potentially getting fat. Those margins get so much bigger that you have a lot more room to make errors, or not necessarily make errors, but your margin of error, you're not making errors. Regardless of how much you train or how much or how little you eat, you're still in that sweet spot because the sweet spot's the size of a barn door.
Okay. Regarding the stress of and Andreas, I know you worked also with professional people in fitness and bodybuilding. Is it the same stress? Because when we were on AAS, basically, what is the stress reflex we were getting into?
I think fundamentally it's all the same at the end of the day. I just think people, you can't define the laws of what it is, you know what I'm saying? But I think people on a different level, see things from a different telescope. People that don't understand these fundamentals of what Broderick is talking about won't understand how all these things are happening. When you add pharmacology into the mix, and I think Broderick said this a lot of times, you can make a lot more mistakes and you can do everything better, faster, stronger, and just better with the least minimal effort as well.
Consider this, Andre. You'll really like this, I think, because I know you really latched onto the whole suntan idea. Imagine this: if you have somebody of Irish descent, they're powder pale and green hair, green eyes, and red hair. And then you have Andre, who's of Mediterranean descent. The concept of getting the suntan is exactly the same. You go out in the sun for a period of time, you come in, you get the stress reflex, and so on. However, it's hard to understand that the powder light pale guy is going to get his sun much quicker.
Yeah.
Not respond quickly. Whereas somebody of
Yeah, because
no steroids.
yeah. So are you talking also about the genome, the genetics? Andrea, I think you're somewhere between.
Sorry, can you hear me? I'm just getting a bit of a. Can you hear me? I just got a bit disconnected there.
Okay. Because I couldn't hear Broderick at all. Because what he was saying, I think he was going down to more into genetics. Because
it's not so much the matter of genetics; it's the concept of that kind of budget concept. If you're super pale, if you're Irish or English or something like that, the amount of sun you can tolerate is very low because you have a very low starting point. You're very pale. You're very susceptible to the sun. Whereas something like Andre has a natural advantage. Okay, he's darker of skin, darker of hair. He can tolerate more sunlight right from the beginning and get a response quickly. Okay, yes, we're talking about an actual genetic difference between the two. But now think about the fact resting testosterone. If one guy's very bottom end of performance and one guy's at the very top end of performance, top end guy can tolerate more exercise and get a bigger, faster response from the exercise. It's no different than this. So now we're going to add drugs and make an unnatural difference.
okay, Andrea, I know you. You want to go?
Yeah, just to add to Brod, no, I can stay another 10 minutes. I just want to give a perfect analogy. You and I've always used this with a lot of when I've given seminars and stuff. Perfect analogy. You take a beauty pageant, right? You take two of them. You put both of them on stage. One with the makeup is the one with the pharmacology. The one without the makeup is the one with no pharm. It's just a perfect analogy of this.
Features, doesn't make them taller, doesn't give them big titties, but it makes them hot. And you're like, wow, look at this one. Absolutely.
So that is the biggest difference here. I mean, give you an example. I mean, I know Kevin O'Brien very well. I've worked with him, and I've we've spoken a lot of the times, and he's just a genetic freak. He can do everything wrong, and he'll just grow. He'll get ripped.
Absolutely.
So the genetic factor does play a big role with a lot of these athletes. I mean, the top 10 Mr. Olympia, these guys are just genetic freaks. The guys that make it are just that genetic upper hand to everybody else. You've got to accept that. I mean, and even with the Africans, I mean, if you look at the African population, I mean, if you look at their upper bodies, I mean, here in South Africa, I mean, a lot of the Nigerians, a lot of the Angolans, the Congolese, they just have these crazy lines and muscle and bulges, and it's just, and you can just see it's just genetics. But you'll find none of them have legs. You know what I'm saying? But it's just, it's crazy. Genetics is and plays a big role, whether you like it or you don't.
It goes down to biology, exactly.
Yeah,
it does.
Oh,
It does.
You can't choose your parents, Rocco.
No. Well, you know what the problem is? We're going to science so much. Like I was talking to Broderick and Andreas. We've talked to this, many times about this. I'm trying to read like 3 papers every day, and I think I'm getting dumber and dumber every time I read a paper because. Back in the days, you see physiques back in the 60s and 70s, and I'm not sure if these guys knew what macros were or what, how much protein they're going to put in, and I always refer to pumping iron. I know I might sound like a bro, but so many times we're talking about RPEs, or we're talking about deloads, or we're talking about how long we need to stay, or how many calories in, calories out. Again, I'm going to say that, but their physiques and their understanding of biology, if I can say that, if I can use that term, it's been shown on stage.
To that very point, Tom Platz and I had a very similar conversation, and he was referring to, Arnold and Zane and a lot of the people from that era, kind of jumped to him, and he Tom, said, science per se, what calories? The secret of getting leaner was eating less calories. The secret of getting more tricky results was largely rolling. And they understood these big picture ideas. But even without understanding what they're like funnies, if you understand it in depth, the large amount of strength and a large amount of rest, and so on, it really doesn't require you to be a scientist. It just requires you to test. Which is a big problem right now. Is
So what you were talking about, you said about Tom. What was like basically? He's a legend.
Yeah.
There's nothing there to say, and the things he done regarding not only physique but strength. And the mentality of his workouts, they were just crazy. What was, do you think, his points and his understanding about what he did?
It's funny. Tom and I had a number of conversations, and his understanding was a very, very interesting evolution where his understanding was always somewhat behind his actions. I remember him saying, going into the end of his career, the very late 80s and early 90s, he was actually trying to allow his legs to not be as big, trying to adjust his training so that his legs weren't so big, or at least as so overpoweringly, comparable to his torso. And so what he did, interestingly, was go to less frequent workouts, bigger, harder workouts, but he only trained legs once every 2 weeks. And strangely, what he found was exactly the opposite of what he intended. What he found was that his legs grew more and got more out of proportion to the rest of his body. And that's, again, much later, into the late 90s, he started to realize that was exactly the perfect example of stress reflex. What he really needed to do was actually train his legs more, in sense, overtrain them. Generate a stress, don't allow recovery. Generate a stress, don't allow recovery. And that would have worn away the size of his legs. Whereas what he was doing was creating a very large stress and then taking a very long period for compensation and super compensation and then creating a very large stress. And so he was actually creating an environment to maximize hypertrophy. Now,
spot on.
For some specific reasons, you got to understand, he was already really big, really muscular. That's not a full token for every, Joe average that thinks, I only have to work out every 2 weeks and I'll get big. No, but if you're already big, that's a great way to get bigger, is by reducing your volume and elevating your intensity. And that's what Tom did. Much lower frequency. So talking about Tom's cognizance of the science, it's probably the highest now that it's ever been, because now he has this entire career to look back on and identify all these things that he did, some right, some wrong, but now he can process, the results of it. And that's the beauty of people like me and Andre and many others, is we have a lens where we can see multiple people in that kind of condition, that sort of elevation. So we can see 10 people making that same mistake, or 20 people making that same mistake, and we have a much bigger, broader understanding than just our own perspective of, oh, I squatted and now I'm sore. What does that mean? Whereas if you see 100 people, you can kind of figure out what that means.
Okay, Andrea, what's your take on basically, I don't want to say again about the stress, but you saw how things were, and you referred to that, about the understanding of how it was back in the days, because you just told me you're in 20 years and you worked with professional bodybuilders. Were they so much into the science, or they just ate, trained, and just were trying to find that spot to add a bit of, stress?
I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think what a lot of these guys and these pro bodybuilders that back in those days were, what they were doing was actually, they never knew the actual scientific principles. Some did, but science is actually catching up. Research is catching up. What they did then only really surfacing now, and it's all actually meeting together. So, like Broderick says, we're all viewing it from different lenses, but we're all actually getting to one end point. The thing that we're all getting to one end point. The difference is how we get to that end point. It's like Mike Israel's way of his maximum recoverable volume and the deloads and that. That's his method of which I call it a zigzag up and down. I may not agree with his methods and stuff, but it doesn't mean that he's wrong. I've got a different approach, but at the end of the day, we're all getting to that end point. When you add the pharmacology to the mix, it's a whole different scenario, and the game changes completely. But saying what the bros did then and was wrong, no. And what I've seen today, the research is actually catching up. What they did 20 years only is catching up to them now. So you know what I'm saying? I think that is the difference. And a good analogy, if you want to see the way Arnold then used to train, and you actually brought it up, was pumping iron. That is the way I think everybody should be trained. None of this slow and this, if that's for you want hypertrophy, the whole powerlifting and strength. I mean, that's where Broderick's expert at. I'm not into the whole power movement. I'm in more physique development. So
what would you
for physique development, pumping iron is the perfect analogy of how a bodybuilder who wants to improve their physique should be trained.
What is catching up? What were they doing correctly, and what is science saying that these guys were doing correctly, training wise? And then Broderick, I'm going to talk about
well, if you take two aspects, okay, you'll take Arnold, who was very high volume. He did a whole lot of repetitions, a whole lot of sets, and you'll take somebody like Mike Mensa and Dorian Yates. Perfect example. They had different ways, different systems, but they were going to the end point. Didn't mean that Arnold was doing high loads of volumes and Mike Mensa was doing. At the end of the day, it still worked. The way it worked was different routes to the end part. You understand? I don't want to get into the deep science and explain every single thing, but just to give it in a short example. Basically, anything can work. It's how. The problem is, everybody now is trying to quantify every single detail. Oh, I've got to do 15 reps, 12 sets, and I've got to take a deload at 5 weeks, 6 weeks. That's to me, that's not understanding the biofeedback of the body. I think we missed a lot of the qualitative elements. Like the workload capacity, recovery capacity. Oxygen debt, all those things that your body is actually telling you, which are far more important than, okay, now it's the 4th week, I've got to take a deload. Those guys didn't do that back then. You understand? They knew when their body needed a break. They knew. I mean, give you an example. Lee Haney, when he was ready to Olympia 8 weeks up, he was having breakfast prior to the show, and he was actually saying, okay, I had egg whites, 2 muffins, bananas, and he felt like he needed more. He actually got in and he needed more, and he was eating more. And the guys look at him and say, my God, but Leanne is eating more, and he looks like that because he's listening to his body. He knows what his body needs. And I think that's another thing that we're missing in the industry. We're trying to science everything, and it's not just, yes, science holds a huge platform, but it's not everything.
You said biofeedback, and just tell me what's your context of biofeedback, and then I'll ask Broderick because I know he really enjoys that.
Scott Abel talks about this, and he's been another one of my mentors for many years, and I've learned a lot from him as well. Biofeedback, you
science is catching up to Scott now.
Well, whatever he's been saying over 20, 30 years, it's all catching up to, it's all surfacing now. Reading your energy within and out of the gym, your hunger levels, your sleep, how you're feeling, your workload capacity, your recovery capacity, your oxygen debt, all these things, that you just can't quantify. You just can't put a number to it. Same with the calories and the macros, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And that's how Tom Platz and Arnold work, and they just knew their bodies. And I think, knowing your body is far more important than being dictated from the outside in.
Amen. Yeah, true. But who does that? Because at the end of the day, it's all about my fitness pal, right?
Yeah, and Fitbits and all that. I mean, don't get me wrong. It holds a starting point. They're all starting points to get you something. But I think you graduate out of those things. You have to graduate out of those things.
It's funny you say graduate, because I'll tell you another funny Tom Platz ism, because he was really good at having little models that he used as his explanation for things. And when asked about his training style, he would often say something like this. He said, if you had no artistic ability per se, and you went down to the local art shop, they might sell you a paint by numbers kit. It's a canvas with basically the picture outline and little fake numbers to tell you what color paint to put where. He said, and if you follow the fake numbers, you can fill in these little spaces and little shapes with the appropriate colors and make a passable image. You create a painting. He said, so you do a paint by numbers every week for a number of weeks or a number of years, and suddenly you start finding that I'm going to put green there, and I'm going to put a little feather on this, and that next thing, you're fucking painting. You're painting. You start by numbers, and you follow the numbers. You did exactly what the numbers said until you got enough understanding of numbers and your own thing. Give up the numbers per se, but you take the numbers and then you add you. You add some, I like this better, I like that better. And next thing you know, your paint by numbers becomes painting art. And Tom, when he was in high school, here by college, and then slowly progressed, and I want, he was doing that crazy shit he was doing, started.
And also, he was a gene freak regarding like his physique and his mentality and the how he basically proceeded in his training and every aspect of his nutrition. He was special.
Yeah.
He was a really emotional dude as well. He had a very strong emotional drive, and he did it a little different than most people. But it's because that's what he had to work with. That's who he was.
True.
Guys, sorry to interrupt, but I'm gonna have to love and leave you.
Okay.
I'm really sorry. I would have loved to have gotten into more detail, and I love chatting to the both of you. Broderick, my mentor, and Rocco, a brother of mine, and I consider you both family. And I'll listen to the rest of this at another stage. I thank you for including me in this, and I hope we can catch up again soon.
We will. Thank you, my brother.
Have a good evening, guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
We talked with Andreas about it, and he's like, "Oh, count me in." He basically has helped me a lot understanding basic aspects, because literally we're talking about yesterday, because I had a client who was telling me about, look, I'm doing the correct things, my calories are these, you know, I should be losing weight, and she wasn't, and I tried to explain the mechanism. It's like, no, you're wrong, because it's all about calories in, calories out. So that's why I'm a bit stressed, because she threw me a couple, I don't want to say the names, because there are gurus out there about the aspect of the calories. So literally I'm like, you know what, I'm not getting into that. You said something about the adaptations of, because you know what, I don't want to be that guy that doesn't say it, but we always talked about the road of adaptation we get with steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many, I don't want to say, there are many categories.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just point out the categories, the effects, the strategies, and when I say strategies, put it in context, is like, why using steroids?
Well, before even talking about steroids, I would talk about using, period, whatever it is.
Okay.
That's something that bodybuilders are particularly guilty of. Is steroids don't cure everything. They do some things really well. They do other things very poorly, and they do some things downright dreadfully. So it's a matter of the way I would suggest you approach drug use at large, and to some degree, not even just drugs, but use at large. I'll come back to that. Is start at the top. You've got good training, you've got good nutrition, you have good lifestyle, and then based on that, you're going to have deficiencies. You're going to find that we're not recovering fast enough, or you're not strong enough, or your body weight is not good enough, or there's going to be a deficiency within that umbrella of you're doing pretty good on the basic shit, but there's still problems. Okay? And those problems will depend on your genetic material, how well you're actually doing the things you think you're doing, and to some degree, outside influences beyond your control. Where you live, the weather, your economy, your budget, your income, stresses from work, stresses from your girlfriend, whether or not you have hepatitis and don't know it. There's all sorts of outside vectors that you might not be immediately aware of. They're impacting how these things turn out, the outcomes you get. So, having said that, what I would do is get all that basic shit in place, generate some outcomes, and then look at what is most relevant for me to address. I'm not recovering fast enough. So recovery, that's definitely a place where anabolic steroids would impact. Now, having said that, of the pantheon of anabolic steroids, some are much more effective at recovery, some are much more effective at protein expression, some are much more effective at aggression. So not only is it now you know what kind of drug to use, a steroid, now you have a general understanding of which drug within that category to choose. But let's say instead of recovery, it's something else. Let's say it's your body weight is insufficient. You're getting stronger, you're getting better, you're doing all your work. Your body weight's going up very high. There's obviously steroids would do that. And for each body of steroids, there's certain ones that would do that better. But drugs like metformin that improve your insulin sensitivity, they might help you accrue body weight. Even drug-like nutritional strategies could fall under that category.
Were you talking about carb loading?
Well, loading's a bad word.
Yeah, that's why.
Exacerbating your carbohydrate intake could do that. Even I'm not a fan of it, but short chain fats, medium chain triglycerides. There's a lot of things that can fall under the heading of ways to get heavier, ways to gain body weight. So when you talk about use, it's a lot of things. For instance, even, again, I'm not a fan per se, but, even under the heading of work capacity, I'm having a hard time getting all this work done. Steroids do that. but so do mild amphetamines, so does Provigil, modafinil, Ritalin. There's a lot of things, so you have to think bigger and look at what do I need, what does that, then what's the best choice within that particular category. You know, for instance, an example I use all the time with people is everybody in the world's been sick, you know, and gotten an antibiotic from their doctor. It's something everyone can relate to. Well, here's the rub. Every single antibiotic, it's actually a partial lie because now there's some really exotic ones, but by and large, every single antibiotic in the world is patterned after penicillin, and they all work exactly the same way.
True.
They inhibit bacterial reproduction and allow your immune system to overcome the bacteria. That's how they all work. Regardless of, yeah, there's gram-positive, yeah, there's gram-negative, but they all work exactly the same way. But even though they all work exactly the same way, through 200 years of organized science and, well, 100 associated with antibiotics, it's been discovered that this particular antibiotic works best on respiratory infections. This antibiotic works best on dental infections. This one on, you know, blood infections, and so on and so on. Even though they work exactly the same, there's little fine differences that make them more or less applicable to that ailment. And that's why when you go to the doctor with bronchitis, he knows which one's most effective.
Sure.
The exact same concept applies to steroids. When you come to me with a problem with your performance, even though all steroids basically work exactly the same way, I can say, this one best treats that condition.
Also, to put that as you like with that you said about drugs is regarding the pathophysiology of each individual. What I would say, allergies, let's say,
absolutely,
same way is going to work with the drugs, with pharmacology regarding enhancement, recovery, growth,
absolutely,
whatever that, what causes we need or stress we need.
Absolutely. And you know, and again, the antibiotic is the perfect analogy. Is unfortunately there's the random, unfortunate sod that has an adverse reaction to amoxicillin or whatever. It's unusual, but it is real. And the same thing applies. 99% of the people can take, you know, Dianabol with no consequences. There's the one unfortunate guy that it's a real problem. You know, that's just the nature of genetic diversity, individuality, and pharmacology. It's not wrong, it's just something to be aware of.
Great analogy, and you're the master of analogies, because the thing we said before, it's really important, and Andrea said that it should be played everywhere. We've got people that literally go into that pharmacology wagon without, first of all, understanding, again, the biology of them, but also, why would you use pharmacology when you haven't exceeded your training, your nutrition, and basically different aspects of the stress reflex we said before? It could be a deload, it could be a superset, it could be a drop set, you know, just adding more stresses to the body, see how the body's going to adapt. Of course, you're not going to gain 12 kilos of mass, of lean mass in a year, especially if you're highly trained, but if we want to put categories, because, you know, let's not talk about, let's say we've got a well-trained person, you know, he's done whatever, like 4 years of training, nutrition, everything, and now he's like trying to bring something to another level. I read a couple of researchers saying people have lower testosterone as the years go by, but people are overusing testosterone in many, many ways. And what's the difference between an androgenic drug, a steroid, SARM, a peptide? Because there's so misinterpretations out there. People saying, "Oh, steroids are steroids. Everything's the same."
Oh, it's not even similar. Not even similar. That, unfortunately, is almost a conversation for the biochemistry class. But let's see. How would I even? Well, first, probably just some basic nomenclature. Testosterone is not an anabolic steroid. Most people don't even understand something as fundamental as that. Testosterone is kind of the parent at the top of this chart you want to make. And then under that chart, there's 2 natural derivatives. Actually, there's 3, but we'll say 2 natural derivatives of testosterone, and that's 19-nortestosterone and DHT. Also, come almost another angle entirely. From testosterone, you also get estradiol and all of the consequences of that. But that's kind of almost a different chart, a different subject. All your progesterone, pregnenolone, all that stuff come up on an oblique angle over there. But right here in the family of steroids, you've got testosterone, DHT, and 19-nortestosterone happen naturally. Then anything manufactured after that is, keyword, manufactured by humans in labs, or synthetic derivatives thereof. Those are defined as anabolic, androgenic steroids. Dianabol, masteron, primabol, and all that stuff, they are synthetically derived from either testosterone or one of those derivatives, natural derivatives. So that's kind of the language of what it is. Most people don't even realize that testosterone is not an anabolic steroid. It's not. It's an androgen.
What do you mean an androgen?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I'll take a second to explain that, although this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is a really simplification. But what was done in the 1950s is testosterone was isolated in the 30s, actually the 20s, and then put on the market in the 30s, and then synthetic derivatives were figured out thereafter. It became necessary to index them one against another. So what they did is they took rats, and they had a number of populations. They had populations that they did nothing to. They had a population that they made walk on a treadmill, and then they had a population that they would give testosterone to, make walk on a treadmill, and then a population that they would give new synthetic drug to, make walk on a treadmill. They would kill them all, euthanize them all, and measure. The rats don't actually have a prostate, but they have an organ much like a prostate called a seminal vesicle. They would measure the seminal vesicle and the levator ani muscle, which, if you don't know rat anatomy, is basically a calf on a rat. And they would weigh those, and did nothing to the population. They would call that a. So they would get a ratio of, on average, the prostates are this big, and on average, the calves are this big. So they would call that the anabolic calf to androgenic prostate ratio. And they would say, okay, that normal is 1 to 1. That's, this size prostate is 1, this size calf is 1, that's normal. And then they would look at the testosterone rats, and they would do the same thing. And they would find, the prostate grew a little bit, and the calf grew maybe more than a little bit. And they would say that's a ratio of 1 to 1. So you've got a normal ratio, you've got a testosterone ratio. Then they would do the same thing with new drug. And they found that some of the less androgenic drugs generated less hypertrophy of the prostate, more hypertrophy of the calf. So that had a superior anabolic to androgenic ratio. Not all drugs were that way. Some were actually exactly the opposite. They created greater hypertrophies of the prostate than of the calf, relative to the baseline. So that's else people don't realize this. Even if something's highly androgenic, it can still be highly anabolic. It's a relative to the baseline. It's not relative to nature. So it's a very complicated subject.
And that's why I wanted to ask you, because sometimes when I talk to people about that is, first of all, you need to check what androgenic effects you want.
Absolutely.
What anabolic effects you want. And then we start building it from there. And they're like, no, it's exactly the same thing. I'm like...
Not even similar. They're not even remotely similar. For instance, when they treat hypogonadal children, they're not really looking for anabolic effects. They don't really care that the children get overly muscular. They want them to get masculinized. So they actually apply androgens to these children to get them to grow hair, change their facial features, to have all the necessary sexual development. It's not about making their muscles grow. You can have the physiology of a 10-year-old girl and still have big muscles. That doesn't make you an effective male. So again, to think that they're one and the same, or it's not important to separate them, is foolish. Now, in the same breath, there are people that believe they're almost exclusive to one another, and that's also foolish. You can't have, like in the case of SARMs, people believe that they're 100% anabolic. No, they're not. Nothing is. That's just foolish. The percentage is very skewed for sure, but they can't be exclusively one or the other because the very mechanisms that make the effect are intertwined.
What would you say about SARMs then? Everybody's saying, oh, we've got the intellectuality of new, which they're not new, ways of getting no side effects, and that's also a question I want to add at the end.
Well, there's no such thing as no side effects. That's just foolish.
Exactly.
You don't understand basic stress reflex. There's a side effect to drinking fucking water.
Exactly.
20 minutes after drinking, you have to go pee. That's a side effect. There's no such thing as no side effects. So put that out of your mind. And exactly what you said, they're not new. For instance, it's not a SARM, but it's a SERM, a selective estrogen receptor modulator, known as tamoxifen, which goes back to the 1940s, I believe.
Yep.
It's not even remotely new. So the concept of non-steroidal modulation of androgen and or estrogen receptors is not new by any stretch. To some degree, the drug clenbuterol does that. So it's not new even a little bit. Here's my big summation of the subject. I think it's an incredibly important subject. I think it has an enormous amount of future and potential, and I sincerely believe that future is not here yet, and people should shut the fuck up about the whole subject. I really don't think that the SARMs we have I think they're completely valid for research to make better ones for the future, but I don't think they're the things that athletes should be taking now. I just don't think, with some very specific examples and exceptions, maybe women, maybe certain aspects, maybe, but in general, I think it's a great idea that just hasn't reached fruition yet, and we need to put time and money into it and stop, doing avant-garde, unnecessary research on ourselves.
True. It's really important what you said before about the androgenic effect and the anabolic effect of drugs. And what would you say about the difference in nitrogen balance in either?
You mean within the realm of steroid cells?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, it's like everything else. It's a sliding scale. You have drugs on one end like Provorin that are measurably more androgenic than anabolic, although they are anabolic. And then you've got drugs all the way on the other side of the spectrum like Primobolan, which is almost exclusively anabolic with very, very little androgenic effects. And each one of them brings its own benefits and deficiencies. For instance, if you're trying to build muscle, Provorin's probably not the best choice per milligram. But if you're trying to build aggression and some of the motor skills and things that come with athleticism, you might want that high androgen impact. Because androgens largely, remember, they're the things that turn children into adults. That's a large amount of what's called in biology remodeling. You're taking this blank template and you're modeling it into this refined, highly coordinated, highly skilled creature that is an adult. Kids are uncoordinated and goofy, and then they become the articulate, refined thing that is the adult. So androgens obviously have an impact on that development. So if you're trying to acquire skills, you're trying to hone abilities, those sorts of things, that's probably an androgen environment. If you're just trying to build muscle, that's an anabolic environment. And then there's that whole sliding scale in the middle.
Would you let's say while you're planning a cycle or you're into a cycle and people don't mind about they start to mind about I hate the word, but I'm going to use it because everybody's using it, so we have to, about the side effects, which is not a side effect because it's basically a cascade of when you're into that loophole, meaning estradiol, progesterone, aromatizing factors, which people don't understand the benefits, but they're starting to use, we want a less androgenic drug, to gain more androgenic effects.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
I do.
And then they go into a post-cycle therapy to basically swap everything out. And then they, in my understanding, is basically why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I feel that way about almost everyone's approach to drug use. Is well, just why are you doing that? What is the purpose? Um, for instance, people will take 1,000 milligrams of testosterone and then they need an aromatase enzyme inhibitor and tamoxifen to blunt the effects that are already present from estrogen, and then they get progesterone impacts and all these different things, and they wind up taking 4 drugs just to support their ability to take the one drug, which is testosterone, where they could take a little bit of testosterone, like a TRT type dose, and then the difference of that 1,000 milligrams could be, and name your choice, masteron, primobolan, stanozolol, etc. And they would essentially have none of those consequences, need none of those ancillary adjacent drugs, get more anabolism for less side effects. The only problem is might be a little more expensive, might be a little more difficult to source, but from an effectiveness and certainly from an efficiency point of view, infinitely superior.
What would be your non-brainer approach to how you basically structure a path? Because basically, first of all, what I say always is if you're going to go to that loophole, or if you're going to go to not loophole, if you're going to take that path, you need to find a person that understands biology. Because if you don't,
Absolutely.
don't even take Tylenol. You know what I mean? Just because people don't get it, and that's a big thing that I want you to go into depth. When you take a pill, aspirin, it comes up with a huge paper, like a huge book with all the side effects. But people are naming, the the drugs, the steroids. Oh, this is, trying to find with the least side effects. And I'm like, what exactly do you mean?
Well, the problem there is, and I point this out to people all the time, even medical doctors, and they all look at me, kind of with this just puzzled look, kind of like when you show a magic trick to a dog. They just kind of cock their head and their ear goes up. And that is, most of what people prize in terms of sports drugs are actually the side effects. Most of the things people are actually measuring the value of is, you stop and think about the things that people prize. Elevations in body weight, elevations in proximal strength, sexual function. Oh, my sex drive bubbled. It must be working great. I've had an erection for 3 days. That's a side effect. The effect, the intended effect is the acceleration of the manufacture of contractile protein, building muscle. That's something you can't even measure on the day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. Even if you're growing like a weed, you can't find that on a scale for 2 weeks. So most of what people are measuring, I'm aggressive, I'm killing it at the gym. That's a side effect. That's not even an effect. So it's really hard to even have that conversation because, like I said, most people are measuring side effects and not actual effects.
What would be the What would be the effect?
The effect is simply achieving the ends in which you set out. With bodybuilding, most of the time, it's simply the accumulation of more muscle mass, the acceleration of protein synthesis. Okay? And like I said, even if you're growing like a weed, stop and think about this. Say you gain, 12 kilos in a year, which is a staggering amount of retention. That's 1 kilo a month. Divide that by 30. That's a very small amount per day. You aren't going to notice that. You're not noticing that 1/30th of a kilo.
No.
It's 100. What's that? 100 grams? That's not. You're not going to notice. That's not even 100 grams. That's nothing on the day level. So that's what I mean is the actual effects. Now, when you get into sports, the actual effects get a little broader because your effects might be enhanced, cognitive function, neuromuscular coordination, neuroinduction, stuff like that, even flexibility. Those are things you might be able to measure more proximally. But, in the context of bodybuilding, most of what you're trying to do is grow more muscle. And that's a very long, slow, almost unnoticed thing.
And it's not you're starting to do a cycle now. You're going to take the results tomorrow, because everybody basically is going mental about I'm gonna not train. I'm gonna eat everything I want because I saw a guy that's on steroids on Instagram and he's eating pizzas and ice cream and this every day, whatever. So that's why I want to do it. Would you play around while you with basically the same protocol training wise when you're using with the pharmacology? Would you do exactly the same stretch reflexes regarding nutrition?
Well,
what changes?
Well, see, it's a matter of, it's funny the way you worded that, what changes. Again, going back to what I said earlier, what changes is margin. It's not, nothing changes as you still have to lift weights, and you still have to wait for a response, and all the things that normally would happen. But just like if suddenly somebody snapped their fingers and made your skin much darker than it already is, what changes? Well, what changes is the amount of time you can spend in the sun. So if I magically snap my fingers and change your hormone levels, what changes? The amount of time you can spend in the gym. And how quickly you recover from that amount of time so that you can do it again. So would the same workout generate results? Of course. Would it generate as much results as, if you're pale and you get darker, but more sun is tolerable, and therefore results move faster when you tan more. So as the drug dosage goes up, theoretically, so should your training volume. And then that means so should your calorie volume. And so should and everything else. So basically, it means you need a lot more of everything, not necessarily to get results, but to get the most results possible under those conditions.
Okay. You've been into professionally, I don't want to say coaching, but mentoring people into the pharmacology aspect. Mm-hmm. What have you gained from this 30 years of
frustration?
Frustration.
Largely just frustration. Actually, I actually do have an answer for you. I've garnered two things. One, exactly what I just said is that most people prize side effects way more than effects. And that's across the board, from sexual function to body weight to water retention to all the things, aggression. They prize that stuff measurably more than actual effects. The perfect drug is the one you don't notice is working other than the fact that you reach your goals. That's the perfect scenario. And then the other major thing I've noticed is as drugs become more and more commonplace sports drugs and less nichey to just athletes. In the 1970s, all bodybuilders used drugs, just like they do today. But no average fitness people use drugs. Now you've got every CrossFit idiot and people doing backyard marathons and shit, and they're using drugs. So as the pool of drug users expands, the stigma gets lower and lower, which on one hand is good because now bodybuilders don't look like the crazy outliers that they once were. But unfortunately, the other problem that generates is the baseline dosage has gone crazy. You know what I mean? It's now like...
That's where I wanted to go, exactly.
If the Joe average CrossFitter is taking 500 milligrams a week, well now, to be a bodybuilder, you got to take 5,000 milligrams a week. And it's just kind of escalated everything out of control. It's kind of like raising the minimum wage. If you raise the minimum wage so that the shittiest worker
inflation
makes 20 an hour, that means that, the doctors now have to get $1,000 an hour. And that's kind of what's happened with drug use, is you've got these shitty, unathletic people taking substantial dosages. Now, to be a bodybuilder, you have to take these ridiculous dosages. And that's unfortunate.
It is, plus you don't know what you're getting anymore.
Agreed. Well, that's a whole separate subject. I'm basing my argument just on the fact that drugs are actually real. Yeah, but then that spiral kind of different.
Because it plays a role exactly the same thing, because, you know, everybody's getting it, so, you know, everybody wants to get into that business. You said big dosages, and, you know, a friend of mine sent me a question because he knew I'm going to have the interview. He's like, so I explained, but he's like, he says, no, brother knows better, and of course you know better, about the big guts we see. And there's big myth around that because people are, you know, are getting all this dosages, they're getting big. I know you're getting angry now, but we have to answer this question.
I don't. I'll start here. Everyone wants to blame it on growth hormone and insulin. I absolutely, positively do not believe that is the cause. I think that is a relevant influencer, but I do not believe that is the cause. Again, I'm going to point out something that I point out 100 million times, and people are tired of hearing it, but I am a biologist, and because of that, I look at things differently. Largely, I look at a much bigger spectrum. Most athletic coaches only look at athletics. They never think outside of athletics. What would happen to regular people, or what would normal populations do, or what does they only look at, you know, and sometimes it's even more specific than that. Not only are they an athletic coach, but they coach a specific position within athletics. And they only, you know, they're just, oh, I'm a lineman coach. They don't even think about the other side of the field or the other side of the ball. They're just this. I'm exactly the opposite. I think about the entire team and how the team interacts with the town and how the town interacts with the city and so on and so on. So it's a much bigger picture. Now, sometimes that limits me because I don't have as much specific detail. I admit that. But I have the other side of the coin is I have much broader detail.
True.
Okay. So that going with this is bodybuilders are not the only people. As a matter of fact, they're the minority of people that suffer from that similar malady. If you look at human populations, you see thin, lean limbs and distended midsections in a number of different populations.
True.
For instance, diabetics, HIV patients, and alcoholics.
Which it has to do with a lot with the basic nerve. I was reading an article saying about you can see that happening a lot since the 90s. It started about the vagus nerve and how it deactivates because of all the alcohol. I don't know if you read the...
Absolutely. And that's just one of the many reasons for that. You also have fatty liver development. You also have visceral water retention. You have a lot of things. But the bottom line is you've got a very similar morphology. A distension of the midsection without the additional accumulation of body fat. You also see it in HIV patients, on and on and on. You also see it in cancer patients. And what do all these things have in common? Two things. A very high, keyword, drug load. Alcohol is a drug. You have a very large saturation of drug per body weight. Same thing in HIV patients. Same thing in cancer patients. Okay, you got a lot of drugs on a relatively fixed body weight. And secondly, you've got a disruption of pancreatic/liver function. You're basically putting these people into, you know, peri-pancreatitis.
True.
Pancreas is one of the major organs that deals with drug volume. So basically what I'm saying is I think that the large amount of distension is not a drug specifically. It's exposure in total to drugs. Seems to do that to humans. You know, think about everybody's drunken uncle with the big, the big round beer belly. He hasn't taken steroid 1. He hasn't taken growth hormone 1. Why does he look like that? it's a saturation of drugs on his physiology. It's exactly the same thing.
True, and thank you for that, because you know, when you have people in your family, you know, friends that drink, and you see that's been happening, you know, limbs, big bellies, and this happening, you know, you're trying to do the correlation between all these pathophysiologies, and people don't get it. They always need to blame, you know, something.
Absolutely.
And for now, steroids is the stigma. Yes, everybody's on it, basically. I love Baker's documentary, but still people are not, don't want to accept it. So I know you're a busy man. I'm just going to ask, in 10, basically, if you could structure in a pyramid, how would you structure, I'm not going to say a safe way, but how would you structure a pharmacology into a training module? How would you start?
Absolutely, I could do that. It's something I pretty much do with my clients every day. What I would start with is exactly what I said. Get training, nutrition, you know, lifestyle in order, and find the deficiencies. What is it you need from your drug use? And I would literally make an outline, and I would start that outline with most important thing. We need an elevated body weight. And then the next most important thing might be some recovery. And last most important thing might be, the guy's a bit of a douche, he needs a little bit of aggression. So I would put these things in a numerical order as to, this is our wish list, this is what we're trying to accomplish. The next thing I would do is take their body weight and multiply that by the relevant coefficient to their advancement. If they've never used drugs before, I'd say that's probably 5 or 6 milligrams per kilogram weekly. If they have used drugs, I'd say it's a little higher than that. If they're, you know, a national competitor, it's probably more like 15 milligrams per kilogram. But I would scale that based on who they are relative to their advancement. And I would generate a total dosage. So subject X weighs 100 kilograms. He's a raw beginner. He's probably only going to need 600 milligrams total. So I put that on the page. I got 600 milligrams to work with. Anytime you take exogenous hormones, your body is going to reduce the amount it makes endogenously. Your production will downregulate. So we'll put 200 milligrams of testosterone in there as PRT. That's just replacing what their body's not making anymore. So 600, we're going to take 200 off for the testosterone. That leaves us 400 milligrams. So I would make a timeline and say, all right, we're going to do drugs for 16 weeks, 200 milligrams of testosterone every week, and then we're going to escalate from that 200 up to a total of maybe 6, maybe even we'll get exaggerated, go to 700 milligrams, and then a small taper at the end. So now I know what the dose curve is going to look like. I reflect on what they need, and I would choose the drugs necessary to fill that gap. Okay, they need a body weight, so that's going to be Dianabol. That's a great drug to accumulate body weight. So 200 milligrams of testosterone, they're going to go 10 milligrams a week of Dianabol, 20 milligrams a week, 30 milligrams a week, and escalate towards something, you know, a number probably not exceed maybe 50 milligrams a day. That's 350 milligrams plus the 200 of testosterone. Voila, we're at 550 total weekly milligrams. About halfway through those total, 14, 16 weeks, I would transition from the Dianabol over to something, let's say, Bolden, great choice. A little less water retention, a little less secondary influences, so that'll help them, improve their strength and performance a little bit. And that's basically how it would look. Calculate what you need, your total milligrams you're allowed, and then the best choices you can choose to reach those goals, and that's about it. Obviously, there's some thought to secondary drugs, possibly estrogen management, possibly this, possibly that. What I will say is, if you really do your job properly, you don't need any of that, or if any, not much.
And that's why I always say, if you need a professional like yourself to be there to minimize all the gaps. Basically, we can create lots of problems, because guys don't try this at home, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nutrition wise, just
as far as adapting it to drug use, The biggest thing there, largely protein and fat stay about the same, only because even if you're growing really fast, you're not growing, an extra arm or something. You're not growing another head. Largely, the big thing that becomes deficient is total calorie volume to power all the new activity and all the new growth per se. So largely there, it's just an escalation of carbohydrates to meet the new calorie demand. As far as any clever or specific anabolic nutrition, there isn't any. There just isn't.
Thank you for that. Yeah, because people are trying to find that magic, sauce that's gonna do that.
It does not exist.
I always say train your ass off. Put the nutrition in place, and if they're in pharmacology, just try to find you basically, and you're gonna get what you want to be. So what's new with Team Evil GP? What's happening?
Probably the only real big news. I mean, I'm busy. I'm doing my thing, and my thing usually is pretty quiet. But probably the big news is April of 2018. I will be live and in person on the continent of Australia.
Whoa!
I'm pretty excited. Yeah, I will be in Australia. At the moment, I have dates in both Sydney and Melbourne. Probably going to be some additional ones on top of that. So that's really the new big exciting thing in my world.
That's amazing.
A little scary. I've never traveled that far, so it's a new thing. But they certainly seem excited and primed for my arrival, and I'm going to do everything I can to give them my money's worth, their money's worth, and earn my money. So I think it's going to be good.
That's awesome. What are you going to cover? You got a plan?
And the plan is developing, but I only have the skills and what have you that I have.
True.
So it's almost certainly going to be, big picture biology, pharmacology, and the integration thereof. There may be some specific points that people want to cover, but in general, that's what I know and that's what I do, and I really won't talk about much else because I don't have much else.
True. Is it something we're gonna be able to have you, let's say, in the UK, in other countries, something it's building up?
I'm completely open to negotiation for, I'm a trained monkey. You throw a couple nickels in my hat and I'll dance. I'm completely open to that. I think I think this Australia trip will probably open a lot of those doors and maybe get people excited for, I'm not the standard fare, I'm not the Mike Israetel, Scott Abel. I have a much different flair. I'm not going to say my information is any better or worse, but my delivery is much different.
Sure.
So I think people will find they either love it or hate it, and hopefully enough will love it to get some other opportunities.
And also, what we're doing together, you're doing it, I think, with other people, which I know, is the one-to-one appointment that people can, you mentor people, depending on their goal, or people like they're basically professionals and they want to engage more, they want to learn more, right? Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're doing a lot more of that, especially with people in your corner of the world. A lot of people in the UK and Central Europe. A lot of people coming to me with that they have a body of clients that they manage and they need. They found issues that they're personally not comfortable manipulating. They kind of filter them through me. A lot of that sort of thing. So I enjoy that sort of stuff. I like solving problems. I like figuring things out.
As a manager advisor, as I always say. And they can find you at Team Evil GSP. Basically, I'm going to just put the website, the link, Facebook and Instagram, which basically you do the 600 pounds and you're getting me angry every time. Broderick, thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
Hopefully I'll see you next week for our one-to-one
Absolutely.
mentoring. I'm so excited about the plans in Australia. I'm gonna that's huge, and hopefully might try to have you in the UK, Greece, and see where else. Maybe Andreas was talking about South Africa.
Yeah, I've actually spoken tentatively about the idea of South Africa. I would love to go down there. It's actually on my wish list, so I'm going to push for that one.
That's cool. Have a great day, sir, and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.